Chapter 1. Abandoned on Carak, 7. Zephyr's consciousness flickered like a fragile flame, barely surviving the harsh winds that clawed at her from every direction. She lay nestled against the cold, unforgiving rocks of Carak, 7, where the land itself seemed to reject life. Her crystalline skin, once a radiant blue, had dulled to a faint hue, her body drained of the essential nutrients that sustained her. The vast, dark sky loomed overhead, a reminder of her abandonment. Her captors had been merciless, deeming her race's beauty and rarity enough reason to exploit her, but too dangerous to keep. So, they left her here, a strange being on a desolate planet where every moment felt like her last. Her thoughts were interrupted by the dull hum of an engine sound she never thought she'd hear again. Weakly, she raised her head to glimpse a small, metallic spacecraft breaking through the planet's thick atmosphere. Her heart beat faintly in her chest, a surge of hope fighting against the creeping numbness that had overtaken her. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Ron Masters braced himself as his ship trembled, battling Carak 7's rough entry conditions. His mission brief had been vague. Investigate a distress signal of unknown origin on this infamous prison planet. While he wasn't told much, he knew that any signal from this hostile place would likely mean trouble. But trouble was what he signed up for. The ship touched down on the rocky surface, and as he prepared to step out, Ron felt a gnawing curiosity building within him. Who or what was waiting for him out there? Here's the continuation of Chapter 1. I'll flesh out the encounter between Zephyra and Lieutenant Ron Masters, building up the atmosphere and stakes. Ron adjusted his breathing mask as he stepped onto the rugged surface of Carak, 7. His boots sank slightly into the coarse, reddish soil, and he could feel the gravity here was heavier than standard, a small, but relentless reminder of the hostile environment. He scanned the area with his handheld tracker, following the faint, pulsing signal that led him toward a jagged ridge in the distance. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if even the wind held its breath, watching him with unseen eyes. His military training kept him alert, aware of each crunching step he took over the gravel-like terrain. Every so often, he glimpsed broken scraps of metal, charred from what looked like past skirmishes, hinting that he wasn't the first to walk these barren plains. After several minutes of trekking, Ron crested a ridge and found the source of the signal. Slumped against a boulder was a figure that defied every expectation he had for this mission. She was unmistakably alien, yet her form was strangely beautiful and eerily human-like, though she shimmered with an ethereal quality that no human could possess. Her skin translucent and crystalline glinted faintly, catching the weak sunlight in a way that seemed to absorb and reflect it all at once. Zephyra stirred, sensing his presence, though she could barely lift her head. Her eyes, a brilliant, piercing lavender, locked onto his with a mixture of fear and hope. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a faint whisper escaped, the syllables unfamiliar yet filled with a desperate urgency. Ron's heart raced as he knelt beside her, carefully assessing her condition. Her frame was slight, her skin cool to the touch, yet he could feel the faintest pulse beneath her shimmering exterior. He realized that her alien physiology was fragile, a delicate balance dependent on some form of sustenance he had no means of understanding. "Here, try this," he said softly, opening a packet of his nutrient rations and offering it to her. But as he placed a small bit in her mouth, she gagged, her body visibly rejecting the foreign substance. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a silent plea, as if begging him to understand what she couldn't convey in words. He switched on his translator, hoping it would pick up some semblance of her language. "Can you understand me?" he asked gently, watching her closely. After a pause, she nodded slightly, her eyes never leaving his. She pointed to her abdomen, a gesture that conveyed her pain, her need. Her voice, though weak, held a haunting quality, the words shimmering with an alien resonance as they filtered through the translator. "Essence. Need essence," she whispered, her voice barely audible, each word a struggle. Ron's brow furrowed. "Essence?" He scanned her vitals, noting the irregularities in her cellular structure. His knowledge was limited, but he began piecing together the idea that she required a very specific form of nutrient compound to survive, one far different from anything he had in his rations. "I don't know what exactly you need," he murmured, But I'm not leaving you here. Zephyr's eyes softened, her crystalline fingers twitching as if to reach for him, but they fell back, too weak to hold themselves up. Her eyelids began to flutter, and Ron knew he didn't have much time. I'll get you out of here, he promised. With gentle movements, he lifted her fragile form and carefully began the trek back to his ship, each step calculated to shield her from the harsh winds. As he carried her, he felt her heartbeat slowing, weakening with each passing second. Desperation gnawed at him. If he couldn't find a solution soon, it would be too late. Inside the ship, Ron secured her onto a medical bed, attaching monitors to measure her vitals. She lay still, her form barely moving, and he could tell her life was slipping away. Racing against time, he consulted every medical resource he had, but nothing matched her species' unique biology. Just as he was losing hope, a fragment of information in his databank caught his eye. It suggested that some alien species could derive sustenance from certain organic compounds in human blood and other bodily fluids, a form of essence that, though unconventional, had been known to sustain similar beings in extreme conditions. He hesitated, knowing the solution might be distasteful and risky, but he also understood that this was her only chance. "Zephyrah," he said softly, leaning over her, "I think I know how to help you." She stirred, her eyes barely open, yet in them, he could see a glimmer of trust. He took her hand gently, as if asking for her permission. Her lips parted, and she gave the faintest nod, as if to say, "Do what you must." With that, he made his choice, drawing a small vial of his own blood and preparing to administer it in a way her body might accept. As he leaned over her, placing the vial to her lips, he could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him. Slowly, her body began to absorb the life-sustaining essence, her crystalline skin regaining its gentle glow, her breath steadying as the sustenance filled her veins. For the first time, Ron saw hope rekindled in her eyes. Chapter 2, First Contact. Zephyr's breaths came more evenly now, her skin glistening with a faint glow as the essence infused her weakened form. Ron watched, mesmerized and slightly unsettled by the immediate effects. The crystalline texture of her skin brightened, as if absorbing energy, shimmering with hues he'd never seen on a living being before. She opened her eyes, fully this time, meeting his gaze with a clarity that had been absent before. Ron's pulse quickened, a mix of relief and curiosity filling him as he saw strength returning to her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice resonating with an unfamiliar musical quality, as if each word held a small, harmonious echo. The translator struggled to keep up with the nuances of her speech, but the message was clear. She understood, and she was grateful. "You're welcome," Ron replied, his voice soft, still holding a touch of awe. "I couldn't just leave you there. Can you tell me your name?" She seemed to struggle with the translation, but after a moment, the words came through clearly. "I am Zephyrah, of the Lemura people." Ron nodded, carefully storing the name. He'd never heard of her species, nor seen records of anyone quite like her. His databanks were expansive, holding information on hundreds of species encountered by the Galactic Federation, but her physiology, her crystalline skin, and her specific dietary needs were unlike anything documented. "I'm Lieutenant Ron Masters, human scout from the Galactic Federation. They sent me here after detecting your distress signal." He watched her carefully, hoping his presence didn't alarm her. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she processed the information. "Human," she murmured, as if tasting the word. "Our people have heard whispers of your kind. Fierce, resilient, but unpredictable." Ron chuckled softly, recognizing the reputation humans had gained over the years. "That sounds about right. We tend to have a habit of surprising people." He shifted slightly, trying to get comfortable as he maintained his watch over her vitals. "Do you remember what happened? How you ended up on Carak, 7? Her expression grew tense, a shadow crossing her delicate features. "I was captured by raiders. They believed I could be sold, traded as an artifact or something rare." Her voice faltered, a slight tremor betraying the fear that still lingered beneath her calm exterior. "But when I proved difficult to control, they abandoned me here, expecting the planet to finish what they would not." Ron clenched his fists, feeling a surge of anger on her behalf. The galaxy was ruthless, But even he struggled to imagine leaving someone as fragile and vulnerable as Zephyra to this harsh, unlivable world. The Lumira were clearly not built for survival in such an environment. He fought back his anger, knowing it wouldn't help her now. "Well," he said firmly, "you're not alone anymore. I'll get you out of here." Zephyra looked at him with an intensity that felt almost otherworldly. "Your essence. It was unlike anything I've encountered. I did not realize your kind held such potency." She paused, the last words spoken with a strange reverence, as if she were still coming to terms with what had transpired between them. Ron cleared his throat, slightly uncomfortable. He'd never thought about the compounds in his own blood as potent, but in her eyes, he could see a sense of awe, mixed with curiosity and gratitude. "I didn't know it would work, honestly. I was just improvising," he admitted with a sheepish smile. Zephyra's gaze softened, and she nodded slowly. "Improvisation. A quality of your people, it seems." She touched her chest, where the faint glow of her rejuvenated energy pulsed with a rhythm that resonated even through her crystalline exterior. "Your gift has given me a chance. I am in your debt." The way she said it gave him pause, as though this debt carried a significance that went beyond a simple thank you. He wondered if, in her culture, receiving aid as she had was akin to forming a deeper bond. But before he could ask, she shivered slightly, glancing at the ship's interior with a look of discomfort. "This vessel, it is confining. My people are accustomed to open spaces, to the feel of life surrounding us. This metal box feels like a cage." Ron empathized with her unease. After all, Carak 7's barren expanse had at least offered open skies. He adjusted the lighting, creating a dim, blue-tinted glow that mimicked the soft light she'd seen on her home planet, as she described. The sight seemed to soothe her slightly, her form relaxing as she absorbed the gentler hues. "Better?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, her voice softer now, as if she were finally allowing herself to relax. "Thank you, Ron Masters." Silence fell between them, comfortable yet filled with the weight of unspoken questions. Ron knew he couldn't take her back to the Federation without a plan. Her existence, her unique biology, would attract attention possibly even from those who had marooned her on Carak 7. For now, they needed to focus on getting off this planet. "Listen," he began carefully, "we're not safe here. The signal from my ship will have alerted others to our presence. We'll need to leave before anyone decides to investigate." Zephyr's expression grew serious. "I understand. I am capable now, thanks to your gift. If danger comes, I will help you face it." A slight smile touched his lips. The alien maiden who'd been too weak to stand mere hours ago was now talking about fighting. Her resilience impressed him, though he couldn't help but feel a protective instinct for her still. He reached over and powered up the ship's engines, feeling the familiar vibrations beneath them as the systems came online. "Then let's get out of here," he said. As the ship lifted off, they left the barren wasteland of Carak 7 behind, ascending through the planet's atmosphere and out into the vast emptiness of space. Ron set a course for a nearby Federation outpost, somewhere they could regroup and assess their next steps. But as he navigated through the star-studded void, he was keenly aware of the presence beside him, an enigmatic being whose life was now tied to his in ways he was only beginning to understand. As they soared through space, the tension of survival behind them, Ron couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a far more complex journey. And as he glanced at Zephyra, watching her marvel at the stars, he knew she felt the same. Chapter 3: Desperation and Discovery. The stars outside the ship's viewport stretched into brilliant streaks as they entered hyperspace, and Zephyra watched them with a quiet, captivated awe. To her, the galaxy was an endless expanse of possibility and beauty, yet it had also proven itself merciless. And now, as she sat beside Ron in the safety of his ship, she felt an unfamiliar mixture of safety and vulnerability, a feeling she hadn't known in years. Ron's attention was split between piloting and observing his newfound companion. He'd never encountered anyone like her, and he had a sense that whatever lay ahead would test them both in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The silence between them was thick with questions, and he could tell Zephyra had many of her own. "Where are we going?" Zephyra asked, her voice softer now, a touch of uncertainty hiding beneath it. A Federation outpost on Yari's 9, Ron replied. It's a safe place, and I have contacts there. We'll be able to regroup and figure out our next steps. She nodded but didn't seem entirely convinced. Her gaze drifted to her hands, tracing the faint glow that had returned to her skin since he'd given her his essence. Her mind was clearly preoccupied, and Ron could see her struggling with something unspoken. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked up at him. In my culture, she began slowly, to share one's essence. It is an act of deep significance. For us, it is not simply sustenance. It's a bond, one that goes beyond mere survival. Ron's brow furrowed as he tried to process her words. A bond? Yes, she replied, her gaze unwavering. In the Lumira tradition, sharing essence creates a tie, a connection that cannot be undone. It's as if part of your life now flows within me. I don't know if this concept exists among your people, but to us, it is sacred. The weight of her words settled over him, and he felt a strange thrill mixed with trepidation. The idea that their bond might be more than he intended, more than a mere act of survival, gave him pause. But he didn't want to retreat from it, not after what they'd been through. I didn't realize it was that meaningful, he admitted, his voice thoughtful. But if it means you're alive, then I'd do it again in a heartbeat. A faint smile touched her lips, a gesture that seemed almost foreign to her, yet genuine. Thank you, Ron. You have given me more than life. And because of that, I am bound to you. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden jolt of the ship's warning systems blaring, snapping them back into the immediate dangers of space. Ron checked the controls and saw a hostile vessel approaching from behind a patrol ship bearing the insignia of the raiders who had captured Zephyra. They must have tracked the distress signal, he muttered, a tense edge to his voice. Hang on, Zephyra. They won't let us go without a fight. Her expression hardened, a flash of anger crossing her delicate features. She turned to him with a steely determination in her eyes. They wanted to enslave me, use me as a possession. They cannot have me back. Ron's hand tightened on the controls as the raider vessel began firing. He maneuvered the ship into evasive patterns, his mind racing through strategies. But he knew their ship wasn't built for combat. The odds weren't in their favor. As if sensing his thoughts, Zephyra spoke up. There is a way. If you trust me, I can guide you. Ron glanced at her, wary yet willing. I trust you, Zephyra. Tell me what to do. She moved toward the ship's control panel, her fingers hovering over the navigation screen. With a deep breath, she pressed her hand against it, and her crystalline skin began to glow brighter, pulses of energy flowing into the system. The ship's controls hummed as if in response to her touch, lights flickering to life in a strange, vibrant rhythm. Your ship systems contain energies that my body can influence, she explained. I can use this to enhance our shields, even channel some energy into propulsion. Ron watched in awe as his ship's readings spiked, energy levels reaching heights he'd never seen before. Zephyra was tapping into the ship's power grid, amplifying its capabilities with her own life force. The raider vessel closed in, firing relentlessly, but Ron could see their shields now holding strong against the onslaught. He glanced at Zephyra, whose focus was unwavering, her expression serene yet fierce as she directed her energy into protecting them. This won't last long, she murmured, her voice strained as she continued to channel her strength. You must find a way to escape. Ron nodded, his mind racing. With their boosted propulsion, he had a chance to maneuver into a hyperspace lane just beyond the reach of the raiders. He steered the ship sharply, the stars outside stretching once more as they surged forward. The enemy vessel fell behind, unable to keep pace. With a final surge, they broke free from their pursuers, the raiders disappearing into the distant stars as they re-entered the safety of hyperspace. Zephyra's hands fell from the console, her energy visibly drained. Ron caught her as she slumped, her breathing shallow but steady. Zephyra, he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude and concern. You saved us. I didn't know you had such strength. She gave a faint smile, her voice a soft murmur. My people, we are more resilient than we appear. But I cannot sustain this for long. I need your essence, once more. Ron's heartbeat quickened, realizing the profound implications of her request. This wasn't just survival now. They were bound in a way he'd never anticipated, and he felt an obligation to her that went beyond duty. Without hesitation, he reached for her hand, offering himself to her again. As she absorbed his essence, he felt an overwhelming warmth spread between them, a connection that transcended words. It was as if part of him was becoming part of her, their life forces intertwined in a delicate balance. When she finally released his hand, her color had returned, her strength visible once more. She met his gaze, and in her eyes, he saw a depth of understanding that needed no translation. "You have given me life twice over, Ron Masters," she whispered, her voice filled with both gratitude and reverence. "And in my culture, such a bond is eternal." He nodded, his expression solemn yet accepting. "Then I'll be by your side, no matter what. We'll get you to safety, and beyond that, we'll face whatever comes together." As they soared through the vastness of space, bound by fate and choice alike, Ron and Zephyra knew they were no longer simply two strangers from different worlds. They were something more, something unbreakable, a force forged in the crucible of survival. And together, they would face whatever awaited them beyond the stars. Chapter 4: Escape and Revelation. The vastness of space stretched endlessly around them, and though Ron and Zephyra had evaded the immediate threat of the raider vessel, they both knew their journey was far from over. Zephyra's strength had returned, but with it came a greater awareness of the bond they now shared, a connection forged through survival, strengthened by sacrifice, and deepened by the mysterious power of her people's ancient traditions. After hours of silent travel, they neared Yari's 9, the Federation outpost where Ron hoped they could find a temporary haven. As they approached the station, Ron keyed in the access codes, feeling a measure of relief as the docking protocols initiated. The shimmering metal expanse of Yari's 9 loomed before them, a complex of towering structures, vibrant lights, and the bustle of Federation personnel, alien and human alike. Zephyra watched the station come into view, her face betraying a mixture of awe and apprehension. "Your people's technology. It is vast," she murmured, her voice tinged with a quiet reverence. "My world is simpler." Ron offered her a reassuring smile as they docked. "We have our strengths, but sometimes simplicity is worth more than all of this." He gestured toward the station's complex structures, understanding that the bustling Federation outpost might seem overwhelming to someone used to the tranquility of her world. They disembarked, and Ron escorted Zephyra down the long corridors toward a secluded wing where he had contacts who might help them without drawing too much attention. But as they walked, whispers and curious glances followed them. Zephyra, with her crystalline skin and ethereal glow, drew the eye of everyone they passed, and her nervous glances betrayed her discomfort. "Stay close," Ron murmured, gently taking her hand. The small gesture seemed to ground her, and she walked with a bit more confidence, her gaze forward as they moved through the crowded halls. They soon reached the quiet office of Dr. Elise Carter, a medical researcher Ron trusted implicitly. Elise was known for her expertise in xenobiology and had worked with Ron on several missions. As they entered, Elise looked up from her work, her eyes widening in surprise at the sight of Zephyra. "Ron, you didn't mention you were bringing a guest," Elise said, her gaze shifting between them with keen interest. "This is Zephyra," Ron introduced her. "She's Lumerae species we have almost no data on. She's been through a lot, Elise, and I trust you to keep this discreet." Elise nodded, her expression serious as she took in Zephyra's delicate, crystalline form. "Of course, Ron. You have my word." Zephyra inclined her head politely, though Ron could see the weariness etched in her features. They had been through much in a short time, and the lingering effects of their escape had taken a toll. Elise began to run scans, her equipment carefully calibrated to avoid causing Zephyra any discomfort. As the readouts processed, Elise's expression turned from curiosity to amazement. "Ron, her biology is incredible. Her cellular structure allows for a unique type of energy absorption. It's as if she's designed to convert the energy of life itself." Zephyra looked at Elise, her gaze steady. "My people do not consume in the way yours do. Instead, we sustain ourselves through an exchange of essence. It is a sacred bond, and one that has now tied me to Ron." Elise shot Ron a questioning look, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "Bonded, huh?" Ron cleared his throat, feeling a slight heat rise to his cheeks. It's a long story. Zephyra, sensing the light-hearted exchange, gave him a gentle smile. In my culture, such bonds are rarely broken. They are a commitment, a part of our very being. Elise nodded, her tone softening as she began to understand the gravity of the connection between them. I see. Well, you're safe here. I'll monitor your condition and make sure you have what you need, Zephyra. Ron, you've done well to bring her here. Just as Ron felt a weight lifting, an alert flashed on Elise's console. It was a security breach A signal from the raider ship that had attacked them. Somehow, the raiders had tracked them to Yari's 9, their determination relentless. We don't have much time, Ron muttered, his jaw tightening. Elise, we need an escape plan. Elise quickly adjusted her console, analyzing the station's layout. There's a passage that leads to an emergency escape pod, designed for quick exits. But you'll need to move fast. Zephyra's gaze was resolute as she looked to Ron. We must go. I cannot allow them to capture me again. Ron took her hand, feeling the weight of their shared bond, the silent promise they had made to protect each other. Together, they moved through the station's back corridors, avoiding the main passages as Elise guided them remotely. The hum of alarms echoed around them, and Ron's grip on Zephyra's hand tightened as they raced toward the escape pod. Just as they reached the pod, a group of raiders burst into view, blocking their path. Zephyra stepped forward, her crystalline skin glowing with an intense light as she summoned her energy reserves, channeling the essence Ron had given her. Her hands shimmered with power, and with a focused, graceful motion, she released a pulse of energy that sent the raiders sprawling. Ron watched in awe as she wielded her abilities with precision and control, defending them both with the strength she had regained. Her bravery filled him with renewed determination, and together they entered the escape pod, sealing the hatch behind them. As the pod launched from the station, Ron activated the coordinates Elise had provided, sending them hurtling into the safety of deep space. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the recent events settling over them. Finally, Ron broke the silence. Zephyra, you were incredible back there. She looked at him, her expression softening. I could not have done it without you, Ron. You gave me the strength to fight, to stand against those who would enslave me. And in return, I offer my life, my bond, to you. Ron felt a warmth blossom within him, a realization that went beyond words. He had saved her, yes, but in the process, she had saved him as well, teaching him about resilience, honor, and the beauty of trust forged in hardship. Then we face whatever comes next together, he said, his voice filled with conviction. She nodded, her hand resting gently in his, their connection now unbreakable. As they drifted into the unknown reaches of space, they shared a quiet, understanding a bond that would carry them forward, no matter where their journey would lead. And though the galaxy remained a vast, dangerous place, Ron and Zephyra knew they had found a place of belonging in each other.